Okay, so we're ready to start. My name is Joel Burton, and it's a really great privilege to host an afternoon with our special guest, Terry Fallis. In my lifetime, I've had 3 encounters with Terry, all recent, and of course, all memorable. The first was here at Museum London for Words some years back, and next to the famous artichoke dip that graces the steaming hotel pans every year for a snack at the opening reception on the Friday of Words. I remarked that the smell of artichoke dip reminds me of words. Am I the only one? At least one, a clap over here. That's cool. So my impression, the dip, it was fantastic. And Terry, such a nice guy, so thoughtful and inquisitive, so engaging in conversation, even with the draw of crudité, crostini, and hot artichoke dip nearby. But I digress, or do I? This year I've learned time and again that Terry has made a similar impression, in person or through his writing, on the folks of London who support this festival, and that's you. Just yesterday I had 2 exchanges at the museum. The first was with a volunteer who let me know a return today was a definite thing to attend this session. The second with a staff member here who reported that Terry's last appearance at Word some years ago meant the purchase of his books. Hopefully all of his books. At last week's volunteer orientation for Words, it was much the same. When we asked the volunteers who they were excited to see, and the joke we tell them every year is if you don't know the authors, just go with Emma Donoghue. Yeah. She's a local favorite, not here. Doesn't even matter, just go with that. She was a recent presenter at Words. But the resounding reply from those gathered was, of course, we're excited to see Terry Fallis, which is no surprise to me. So that's my first encounter with Terry. At the Museum for Words, years back, again, an absolutely resounding success in more ways than one that I think has contributed again to the attendance here today. Nice, thoughtful, inquisitive, yet smart and in command, organized, as if he trained in the type of discipline that would yield those very results. Did I mention that Terry has an engineering degree? And that's before his time as a political strategist or co-founder of a communications agency, or as we best know him, an award-winning writer here with his 7th novel, Albatros, published in 2019. So, with what I said in mind, an engineer by training, a communications specialist by day, you just know you can trust Terry. You can count on him. And that's why in my second to last encounter with Terry, I followed him and a small group into the wilds of Newfoundland, which, and I'm telling the truth, maybe, ended with an equally wild tale of trying to outwit a bear. Yeah, trying to outwit a bear. Not to be outdone, my final encounter with Terry, there we were, trying to find our way through the dark, and here dark is key. Stuck on a bridge in raw nature, winds picking up, waves crashing, overhanging a rocky outcrop of land in what felt to us like the middle of the ocean. A 2-time winner of the Stephen Leacock Medal for Humor, Terry Fallis is the award-winning author of 7 national bestsellers. His debut novel, The Best Laid Plans, won the 2008 Stephen Leacock Medal for Humor and was crowned the 2011 winner of CBC Canada Reads. In January 2014, CBC aired a 6-part television miniseries, based on The Best Laid Plans. Terry's 4th novel, No Relation, hit bookstores in May 2014, opened on the Globe and Mail bestsellers list, and won the 2015 Leacock Medal. 3 days after Albatros, this year's novel was published, It broke onto the Globe and Mail bestsellers list. Terry lives in Toronto with his wife and 2 sons. So what follows here this afternoon, an afternoon with Terry Fallis, is I'm going to ask Terry to join me for a couple of questions. Then there's going to be a presentation by Terry on his own work. And then there'll be some time at the end to engage with the author. But I must return. What of the bear? What of the dark time on the bridge? Well, there was no bear. At least not in the flesh. I was privileged to join Terry and a group for the annual Writers in the Wild in Grossmorn Park, where he read a passage from Albatros that definitely sticks out, featuring a bear. As for the dark, I think it was a dark roast on the deck of a coffee shop in a town near Grossmorn. And the bridge was this part of a local dialect, because we learned, of course, that in Newfoundland, a deck is commonly called a bridge. So that mystery solved, no bear, no bridge, but dark coffee. I invite Terry Fallis to join me, and I hope you can join me in welcoming him here today.
Wow, that was something. I think all Joel has done, perhaps I'll turn this on. Stand by. Oh, we're good now. How's that? Hello. All right. Thank you, Joel. I think what Joel has done is elevated expectations to an unreasonably high level. But I'm thrilled to be back here in the warm embrace of London and this festival. Thanks for having me. Should I slide over? I feel like I'm far away.
You thought I was going over there?
I did.
So, speaking of Newfoundland, one thing that strikes you in Newfoundland, and about Newfoundland literature in particular, is this absolute love of language, which I know you share, and I know you've talked about in the past. So my question is, how did your love of language come about, writing as well? And maybe to bring it home, how does it actually feature in your current novel, Albatros?
Good question. Well, the love of language for me goes back a long way, and I blame my father for it, actually. My father, who just passed away in January, was a pediatric surgeon and the first head of the emergency department at Sick Kids Hospital in Toronto.
Right.
But he was also a lover of language, and he engendered in all of his offspring a love of language, a respect and even reverence for English, which often manifested itself in correcting our grammar incessantly. And we would sit around the dinner table on Sunday nights and debate the geopolitical implications of the split infinitive and other important and pressing matters of the day. It did help to cut down on dinner guests. But I blame my father, and I think he was a very good writer. He wrote a number of books as well, not fiction, mainly medical books, but he did write a pseudo-memoir of his time as a camp doctor. And he just loved words and he loved language, and I think I got that from him.
And in terms of Albatros, where does writing factor into that novel in particular?
Well, there is a subtext in Albatros about the writing game. As you'll hear, Adam, the narrator, wants nothing more than to be a writer. It's what he dreams of all the time, is being a writer. So when you're writing a character like that, it allows you to wax poetic, if that's what I did. You want to talk about writing and how it works and why it's important and how the publishing game works. So all of that seeps its way into this novel. But I always try to write thinking of my father and writing clearly, but also I like to splash around in the English language. I hail from it the why use 6 words when 12 will do school of writing.
I like that school.
So as opposed to the Hemingway style, which I'm not a huge fan of. But so I like language, love words, love sentences, and I hope that's evident on the page.
Absolutely, and Albatros is dedicated to your father, I understand?
It is. It is.
That's lovely.
Well, I'll come back to that in the presentation.
Okay. So part of what I tried to do in my introductory remarks is, successfully, I don't know, but intrigue through setting. And I think often when we come up to the front and talk to authors, ink-hand lit setting is obviously going to be at the fore. I'm thinking here of Lisa Moore, who was here last year. And in the, I think both in a presentation in this room and in the opening session, there was talk, obviously, of landscape and landmarks. And I think she discussed, as a Newfoundland writer, that moment when you felt you could embrace your local. You could have those landscapes and those landmarks to paint that tapestry. As contrast, we had Cape Breton writer here, Lynn Cody, for this year's opening. And she wanted to almost defy, at points in her writing career, expectations around the Cape Breton that the audience would want. This is the Cape Breton of natural landscapes, of the Cabot Trail, of sunny days in July, not dark, cold days in February. So I was thinking about this in your novel, in your other work. The Canada presented here is obviously a Canada that we're familiar with, but there's also these spots of intrigue. I think some of the spots of intrigue, of appeal, come from the main character's relationship with golf, because golf is going to keep you traveling. And there's even a scene in Dubai that I think could be out of a Bruce Willis movie. So I'm thinking of why did you want to stitch Canada? Why did you want to defy expectations around Canada by moving outward globally through the US and even to places like Dubai? What was your thought process behind that?
Well, that's a good question. I think ultimately I did it because it served the story in this case. It wasn't a deep philosophical desire to paint Canada as part of a broader world, although I could probably make that argument. It would sound rather erudite, but that's not what I was thinking. But you want the story to ring true. So in this novel, Adam becomes a very, very good golfer. I'll talk more about that. And if you're among the best golfers in the world, maybe the best golfer in the world, the United States is going to be your home for a good part of the year. And he gets a chance to travel lots of different places based on his prowess as a golfer. So it fit with the story, and I wanted him to be exposed to lots of other things to prove to himself that writing was indeed what he still wanted to come home to.
That passion project.
Right.
I'm also thinking of, because you've had varied career yourself, through some of the things I mentioned in the opening, I think Adam is a character that thinks through this pursuit of career that we all go through at a certain age. And it seemed to really be enlivened, and it seemed like a subject that obviously you lived and thought quite a bit about. I was wondering if you could say a bit about why you chose this novel to discuss the idea of the pursuit of a career, and I think what you called recently at Q the question between success and happiness.
Yeah, central to the story in my mind. I mean, I almost think of this novel as a fable, and fables have morals, and the moral of this story, I think, is for us to understand the tension that exists between success and happiness. We strive for success our entire careers, and we often do so thinking that that's almost the same as happiness. And often we discover that it's not the same as happiness. And it's the novel, I hope, is a reminder to all of us to remember what it is that makes us happy and ensure that we find a way to integrate that into our life, whether or not it's our career. I think it's perhaps rarer than it should be that our careers coincide perfectly with happiness. how many of us are perfectly happy with our career, doing what we were built to do, and being utterly fulfilled by it? Probably fewer than should be the case. So that's what I'm trying to get at in the novel.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thanks for that. It did resonate with me for sure. Last question, maybe before I ask you to do the presentation that you prepared. I was listening back to an earlier interview with Sheila Rogers that you did, and I think it was at the time that the Best Laid Plans was on Canada Reads, in and around that time. And there was a quote that I had noted here that reminded me of something I saw in Albatros as well. So it's obviously something that's been on your mind a lot, and it might actually give you a chance maybe to pick up again in the presentation or even to reiterate a bit of what you were just discussing. Best Laid Plans, the subject, broadly speaking, was politics. And the quote is that you said, "Politics just happens to be the stage on which this story unfolds. It's really the tale of how people deal with tumultuous change in their lives." And again, in the acknowledgments section of your current novel, Albatros, you note, "But despite initial appearances, this is not a novel about golf. It's about life." I was reminded of another section of the novel where the protagonist is at a seminar for creative writing at a U of T, and there's a lot of talk of needing to get under the prose to reveal some subject. What does it mean for you to use one subject, be it politics, be it golf, to get under another subject and explore, I think, these larger questions of tumultuous change, or as you say in this one, life?
Yeah, wow, good question. Well, I like to use story as a way to give readers an entry point to an issue.
Yes.
In my first two novels, yes, it was about tumultuous change. It was about the state of our democracy and our obligations as citizens. But back then, if I had written a rage-filled nonfiction polemic on the state of politics in this country, nobody would have published it and nobody would have read it. So I
Is that the same in 2019?
well, yes, I think so. So I decided to cloak my ideas on the state of democracy in a funny story and put my thoughts in the minds and the mouths of some characters you might come to like. And I hope that, I think you could read that novel just as a funny story, but my broader goal and hope and intention was almost by stealth to have the reader give passing thought to the more serious issues that underlie the fun. So in this case, I needed to cook up a story that allowed me to examine this issue, this tension between success and happiness, and how we sometimes confuse those two commodities. And this is what I came up with. So it's novel as metaphor in a way.
Yeah. I think I've heard you say once before that maybe in Canada we don't take comedy seriously enough.
Right. Yeah, well, exactly. I mean, I'm a big believer that comic novels can be doing serious work, serious business. I'm not suggesting mine always do that, but it's possible. Just because we're laughing doesn't mean we're not thinking at the same time.
On that, I'd love to invite you to the podium for your presentation.
Excellent. Good man.
Wow, isn't he great? That's very good, Joel. Thanks for having me. Nice to be back. I know we're under some time pressure, so I will try and fly through this. I'll try and bring it down to 90 minutes or so. No, I won't do that. If you heard me speak before, you may know that I'm a member in good standing of the Write What You Know School of Writing. You can find pieces of me and pieces of my life kind of strewn about the pages of my novels, but I hasten to add, not in an autobiographical way. I don't write about me, but I do find it easier to write with authority and conviction and authenticity if I'm writing with something that I know about or have experienced before or care about. And that's certainly the case for this novel. This is my novel in a nutshell. Yeah, I know, it's very lame, isn't it? The jury's out on this slide. There's a lot going on here. I'm not going to give away stuff in the novel or too much, and everything that I tell you here, you find out in the early pages. So Don't worry about missing out on the story. But in the story, there is a young wannabe writer whose name is Adam. We'll meet him in a minute. There's an aging phys ed teacher. There's an obscure Swedish kinesiologist and his obscure kinesiology theory, which is lots of fun. Yes, there's a measuring tape, a love story, and what I call an antiphonal novel. Are there any choristers in the room? Anyone sings in a choir? What, nobody sings in the choir? Oh, we have a few hands at the back, good. Well, I grew up singing in a choir, and we would occasionally perform antiphonal anthems where half the choir was on one side of the chancel and the other half was on the other side, and we would sing to one another in a responsive fashion. I hijacked that term and attached it to the word novel. And in this story, Adam and his girlfriend are writing what I called an antiphonal novel. They write alternating chapters, which charts the course of a relationship of a young couple many, many years earlier, an earlier generation. Yet what they're really doing is writing about their own relationship, and they are discovering different thresholds that they are crossing or tripping over in their relationship by reading the chapters they have written to one another's. There's a story of friendship as well. And then, to make sure that you're all comfortable, I threw in all the old familiar tropes in a comic novel, like golf, fountain pens, Lake Tomogamy, the Burj Al Arab Hotel in Dubai, paparazzi, and a black bear. So just wanted to make sure you were, feeling at home. Maybe just to start off with the title, why is it called Albatros? Well, until very near the end of this process, it was not called Albatros. After we finished the edits, both edit rounds, the copy editing, the substantive edit, the proofreading, everything was all set to go to print. My editor emailed me and said, okay, that's all done, it's ready to go off to the printers, but about the title. Because I had written the whole novel under another title, and the title I'd come up with was, If at First You Succeed. I thought it was quite clever. Clearly your reaction suggests otherwise. But, when you get set on a title, that's just, I like to have the title before I start heavy work on the novel because it sort of grounds me in the story. But apparently there were some concerns about that title, and she said, what else have you got? And of course, I had nothing, but an hour and a half later, I emailed her back and said, how about the one word title, Albatros? And then I explained why. I like to have at least two meanings in my titles. Earlier titles have that, you can see that feature, One Brother Shy. My last novel has more than one meaning to that title. Poles Apart, previous novel before that, has more than one meaning. Albatros has at least two meanings. First of all, the famous Samuel, I think I've miswritten his name here. It's Samuel Taylor Coleridge, I believe. It's Coleridge is the last name, right?
Yeah.
Right. I'll fix that. Hard to get good help on doing these things. I did that. Anyway, he wrote this famous epic poem called The Rime of the Ancient Mariner. One of the stanzas goes, ah, well a day, what evil looks had I from old and young. Instead of the cross, the albatross about my neck was hung. And this poem gives us that cliche now, the albatross around my neck, the burden we must bear. And in the poem, a sailor kills an albatross that flies too close to the ship. And the captain is so incensed with this rather meaningless murder or violence that he makes the sailor hang the albatross around his neck for several days thereafter. And that's where this comes from. If there are any golfers in the room, you may know there's another definition of the word albatross, and it's 3 strokes under par on a hole. In other words, if you sink your second shot on a par 5, you have scored the elusive albatross. Something I have never done in my life. Now the term is a bit outdated. It has been replaced with the term double eagle, but albatross is the official term. And both of these play a role in this story. Adam becomes an extraordinary golfer, gifted golfer. He didn't even know he had an inclination in this area, but golf, particularly his success at golf, becomes an albatross around his neck. Let me introduce you to a few of the characters. Adam Coryell, 17 years old when the novel opens. He loves three things. He loves writing and literature, reading. He loves fountain pens. He is a fountain pen nerd. And he loves his girlfriend, Allison Clarkson. He's not an athlete by any stretch of the imagination. He really just wants to become a writer. Bobby Davenport, and these photos have no real bearing on what the characters may look like. I just was looking for photos on the internet. Bobby Davenport is his homeroom teacher, his phys ed teacher. She also teaches the writer's craft class. Adam has just started his last year in high school. They have a few things in common. She also loves writing and literature. That love was born on the inside a mobile library in Thessalon, Ontario, where she grew up. And there's a sort of a side story about that in the novel. But the world of literature was opened up to her when she stepped onto this mobile library for the first time as it was driving on the way back to Sault Ste. Marie, stopped in her little town of Thessalon. She's also a fountain pen lover. Adam discovered this when she was handing out the insurance liability forms on the first day of class, and he noticed her inky fingers, a telltale sign of a fountain pen aficionado. He flashed his inky fingers, and the bond was formed. She's also, or was, I should say, a stellar golfer, a collegiate golfer. She had a full-ride scholarship to Stanford, was about to join the LPGA Tour, having grown up on the Toronto Ladies Golf Course. That's where she was a member. Her family was eventually a member there. And she just was club champion year after year. Finally, on the eve of her joining the LPGA Tour as a professional golfer, her back gave out on her. She swung with such ferocity that her back simply couldn't take it. So her dream, she came so close to achieving her dream, and it just faded. So she became a teacher. Allie Clarkson is the love interest, I guess you could say. Adam meets Allie on the first day of school the previous year, their grade 11 year, where he sat next to her. She was new to the school, and she was writing notes with a Lamy Safari fountain pen. Yes, I know, there's a few fountain pen lovers in here. Any fountain pen nerds amongst us in the crowd? Yep, 2. That's just about the standard demographic proportion of fountain pen lovers. Anyway, she is a naturally gifted writer and a lover of literature. Adam is not gifted. He just wants to be a writer, and he works very hard at it and is quite good and getting better. But he's not blessed with the natural talent that Allie has. Finally, I should introduce you to Professor Ingemar Gunnarsson. I thought that was a pretty good photo for Professor Ingemar Gunnarsson. Doesn't it look like a Swedish kinesiology professor? He was a fun character to write because he has no filter. What he thinks, he says, and this has led him down many dangerous paths and caused him no end of problems. In fact, he has been banished from his beloved homeland in Australia, university there. I think it was Sydney. Yes, I think so. And he has now landed a job at a university in Adelaide, Australia. So he's in Australia, pining for his home in Sweden. So it was Stockholm. Sorry, he was at the University of Stockholm, and he got fired from there because his filter issue. Anyway, he came up with this theory, and Bobby Davenport reads about it in a Swedish kinesiology journal. You all have subscriptions, I'm sure. And this is the first sentence in chapter 1. Would you mind if I measured your extremities? And this is the line that Bobby delivers to a few of her male phys ed students on that first day. She's reading this as they're filling out the liability forms. And the theory is called the Predictive Innate Pinnacle Proficiency Theory, or PIP for short. And it involves taking the measurements of all sorts of different bodily appendages and plugging those measurements and ratios of those measurements into this algorithm that Professor Gunnarsson has developed, and out pops a Gunnarsson number out of 100 for a particular sport. You have a different Gunnarsson number for each sport. And he came up with this theory. He just believes that everyone is sort of built to succeed in one sport. Everyone has a body that should be able to do one sport pretty well. The problem is many of us don't stumble upon the sport that we could have been world champions in. So he developed this theory by studying world champions, Olympic gold medalists, the best in the world, taking their measurements, thinking about their particular sport, coming up with this algorithm. And he gave Gunnarsson numbers, or came up with Gunnarsson numbers for these athletes. You know, Tiger Woods got 88, Gretzky 89, Michael Phelps 89, 88 for LeBron James. I know what you're thinking. Shouldn't they be 100? Shouldn't they be the top of the scale? Well, this is where the speculative part of his theory comes into play. These great athletes reached their pinnacle through discipline, desire, and relentless practice. That's what led to their success. Tiger Woods has done very little else with his life leading up to his success other than swinging a golf club. The same with Michael Phelps in the swimming pool. Actually, Professor Gunnarsson believes that there is a second group of people where this whole thing is not about discipline, desire, and practice. He believes that there's a group of people whose body is so naturally, perfectly designed for a sport that it's the natural motion, no practice, and no thinking that will lead to success. Because he believes that practice will affect them in a negative way in that sport if they are above the 90 number. Because practice is not natural at all. It's the forced repetition of a certain bodily movement that isn't natural at all. You can keep doing it over and over. You're defying your natural body by doing that. So as far as he's concerned, there are some people out there, he hasn't met one of them yet, with scores over 90, where their body is just so perfect. They have to empty their head and just play the sport the way their body tells them to. So anyway, Adam goes after school, and Bobby Davenport takes his measurements. And lo and behold, when she punches the numbers in and does it 3 times over to make sure she's not making a mistake, Adam gets a score of 99 for golf. Has he ever held a golf club in his hand in his life? No, he has not. Does he like golf? No. Does he like sports in general? No. It's purely for scientific reasons that she persuades him to come to the driving range at the Toronto Ladies Golf Course, and they try out this theory. And his very first swing, never holding a club before in his life, closing his eyes and just listening to what Bobby Davenport instructs him to do, empties his head, does what his body tells him to do. His first swing looks not unlike Ricky Fowler's swing. And Ricky Fowler, for those of you who don't watch golf, has one of the most beautiful swings on the PGA Tour. He spent his entire life perfecting his beautiful and natural swing, and Adam has given a reasonable facsimile of it the first time he's ever held a club. So, bottom line is, Professor Gunnarsson's theory seems to work. He was right. And the novel takes off from there. Without giving too much away, in rather short order, Adam becomes the best high school golfer in the city, then the best golfer in the country, and then on the continent, and then in the world. Just by not thinking about golf and swinging his club the way his body tells him to. Some settings. I'm flying through this. I want to make sure we have time. Novel is set in Toronto. That's a shot of the Toronto Ladies Golf Club, which is a wonderful place. I actually presented this novel at that club a couple of weeks ago, and that was kind of lots of fun. Adam does land a full-ride scholarship to Stanford, where he's much more interested in studying creative writing, which he does there, but he plays on the golf team, and leads them to the NCAA championship. Other settings, Augusta, he plays in the Masters. He plays in the Olympics in 2020. There's a scene that Joel kindly mentioned that's set in Dubai, and an important week, about a week, he spends in Lake Temagami by himself, thinking about things. So as Joel mentioned, to me this is not a novel about golf. I could have written it about, well, it wouldn't have been as good if I'd written about hockey, but I had just as much experience with hockey than I have with golf. So it could have been about another sport, but it's not so much about the sport. I think of it as a funny novel about life, about love, about grief perhaps, and what we were discussing earlier, this tension between success and happiness. I'm always interested in why writers write the novels that they write, so I thought I'd give you a bit of insight as to why I went down this path. First of all, why Toronto, and why is it set in the little community of Leaside in Toronto? Well, this is easy. I'm one of the few who was born and raised in the city of Toronto, and I went to Leaside High School for all 5 years. Back then it was 5 years, just to be clear. So it was easy to do. So it's purely out of laziness that I write about Toronto and Leaside. Why would I write about a different city and a different high school that I didn't go to? Because that would require research. So I'm writing about things that I know. Why have I written about golf? Well, I've played a lot of golf. Here I am in 2019. If you look closer, you'll notice that I am not on the fairway in this photo. This is my traditional position, next to the fairway, seldom on the fairway. I have played a lot of golf. If we go back to 1977, back when short shorts, high sweat socks, and plastic visors, I tell you, I was on the leading edge of golf fashion back then. This was all the rage then. And yes, it's hard to imagine I was once that skinny, but I was. This was back in the day when I was thinner and my hair was thicker. I seem to have suffered a reversal in fortunes on both fronts. But I played a lot of golf. My twin brother Tim and my brother-in-law Tony and I have an annual golf pilgrimage to Virginia. We start on a Wednesday morning at about 4 o'clock in the morning, drive 10 hours or nearly 1,000 kilometers down to Luray, Virginia, to the Luray Caverns Golf and Country Club, and we play golf that afternoon after that drive. Then we play 36 holes of golf for the next 4 days in a row, drive halfway home, play another 18 holes, and drive the rest of the way home. This golf course was the site of my greatest golfing triumph. I scored 79. I broke 80 once in my life. I would have brought you this tattered card to show you. I know you would have liked to have seen it in the flesh, but I just wasn't able to get to my safety deposit box on a Sunday morning. So I didn't bring it. But so why golf? Because I've played a lot of golf. I don't have to research it. I watch golf on TV, which I know defies people's comprehension, but I do. So I know a lot about the game. It was easy to write those parts of the novel. So why Lake Temagami? Well, I've spent a lot of time are the Eberhards here? Is John not here? Okay. A couple of ex-campers are from this camp were actually here today. So I spent the first 16 summers of my life on a remote 20-acre island on Lake Temagami at Camp White Bear. My twin brother and I attended, our first summer there was when we were 18 months old. I know what you're thinking, what kind of camp is this? Well, my father was camp doctor, as I mentioned earlier, for the first 6 years of our life. But when we were 6 years old, we got to go as fully fledged campers. If you've been to Lake Temagami, you don't need me to tell you what a special place it is. Temagami is an Ojibwe word. It means deep water. At some points in this lake, it's 800 feet deep. It is a very special place. In the novel, my brother and I, this is 20 years ago or something, but we still go back. The camp folded when I was 15, but
The island is still there, as you might know, and we go back and visit it because if you go to the right camp at the right time in your life, it can be very formative. It can be influential. It can be life-changing, and I think that was the case for my brother and me. We loved it. In the scene in the novel, Adam is out paddling. He's by himself camping so he can think through the next part of his life. And he's out paddling in a very calm part just next to his campsite, and he sees a loon. And as we do when we see loons, he watches and waits to see it dive. And it dives, and then he scans the lake to see where it might pop up. And as he's looking, this white and black streak, a torpedo, goes right by the length of his canoe. It was the loon, just about a foot beneath the water. It looks something like this, with bubbles behind it, literally like a torpedo. He could have reached out and touched it. And I wrote about that, I hope, with great clarity, because I had that experience on Lake Temagami. When I was 14 years old, and I remember it like it was yesterday. So I put that in the novel because I could. Great experience. There's also a bear encounter. I've had plenty of bear encounters. I won't tell you the story, we're short on time. But what you're reading in those two sections are little splashes of autobiography, because I've been there. There's an awful lot about fountain pens in this novel. And that didn't require any research either. I'm a fountain pen nerd. This is the current state of my fountain pen collection. To me, it's not because I wanted to collect something. It has to do with sort of it being a link to writers of a different era. So when I write with a Parker dual fold fountain pen, that's the same pen and has the same feeling when writing with it that Sir Arthur Conan Doyle had when he was writing the Sherlock Holmes stories, which are so near and dear to my heart. So I love fountain pens for the almost tangible link they provide me to writers of the past, writers I have revered and read. So that could go into the novel. Is it important? Not really. Is it central to the story? Not at all. Does it add color, texture, flavor, idiosyncrasy, a bit of quirkiness? I hope so, because that's what I intended with it. So why the Burj Al Arab Hotel in Dubai? Well, I visited Dubai. I don't know why. I was invited to go to Dubai to speak at a conference, at a writers' festival, largely because of the huge following I have in Dubai for my books. My books aren't available in Dubai, so I have no idea how I got invited, but I said yes, and I went, and it was lots of fun. I spoke at the American University in Sharjah. Both people who came seemed to get a kick out of it. But I did have fun. And in the novel, Adam, for one of his principal sponsors, Nike, is doing a promotion. He's hitting golf balls off the helipad, I guess, on the top of the Burj Al Arab into the Arabian Sea, and a video was being shot, and it's just something that you do as part of your sponsorship responsibilities. Where did that come from? Well, I remembered a Guinness Book of World Records we had growing up, my brother and I, we shared it. And I remember this photograph. It was Tony Jacqueline, a British golfing sensation back in the day, who was hitting golf balls across the Thames. And this had stuck in my mind, and I adapted it for my purposes in this novel. Why John Irving? And you're thinking, I don't know what you're talking about. John Irving makes a cameo appearance early in the novel. Adam and Allie are great lovers of John Irving, and they go and listen to a reading of his at Harbourfront, which is something that I have done. In fact, Prayer for Owen Meany is probably my all-time favorite novel. So John Irving is my mentor. I'm not sure I mentioned that. He doesn't know that. But in my mind, he is my mentor. He's taught me a lot about writing, particularly juxtaposing humor and pathos, and sometimes rubbing them right up against one another so you can laugh in one paragraph and be punched in the throat in the next. And I only put this slide in because this is such a tiny little scene at the beginning of the novel, which has little bearing on the rest of the novel. Yet when the Toronto Star reviewed Albatros, they decided to go with this headline, "Hero just wants to write like John Irving." It was such a small part of it made me wonder whether the reviewer only read the first chapter, but I'm sure that's not true. Maybe I shouldn't even read. We're at 4 o'clock, so maybe I won't read, or...
We started late.
We started late? I don't want to... I'm looking at Josh back there, who's saying, don't put this on me.
I think the people need to read it.
Okay. All right, so I'll read the first half of the novel. I'll read the shortest reading I have. But that's the story in a what sort of launches the story, what I've talked about. Let me read you a scene that takes place at the Ladies Golf Club of Toronto, where Bobby Davenport has taken Adam for his very first game of golf on a course. They've been to the driving range, and he's hitting the ball straight and far in a shocking way. And now he's playing golf for the very first time. He gets to drive the golf cart, which he's far more interested in than playing golf. And this is a little bit of what happens on the golf course. We carried on. I shot, we talked, I drove, she shouted, I slowed down, we talked, and I shot. Playing a round of golf sure eats up a lot of time. It took hours, maybe 3 or 4. I thought I was doing quite well. At golf, I mean, not at cart driving, but I really didn't know enough about the game to be certain. Ms. Davenport was encouraging and very helpful, but other than on my opening shot, she wasn't exactly doing handsprings and hurling superlatives whenever I finished a hole. Maybe she was a little jittery from my driving. But honestly, there were only a couple of close calls, and she wasn't even in the cart for one of them. We finished the 18th hole, and after handing the rental clubs back, we had a drink on the patio. Ms. Davenport looked a little shaky, even stunned. I was a little concerned. She downed her Arnold Palmer, iced tea and lemonade, in 2 big gulps. Are you okay, Ms. Davenport? No, I can't say I am. This is absolutely shocking, and I suspect it has never happened in the long and rich history of the game. Well, I already apologized. I swear I thought I had steered clear of that garbage can, and how was I to know the pond was right behind? My view was completely blocked. It was an accident. Mr. Coryell, I'm not referring to your sudden and unauthorized immersion in the water hazard. The golf cart will dry out, eventually. I'm talking about your golf game. Oh, okay then. But I do feel kind of bad about the whole driving the cart into the pond thing. Well, you finished with a 74, which for men is 4 over par on this course. Well, that's a little disappointing. Aren't you supposed to make it around in par? Mr. Coryell, only a microscopic slice of recreational golfers ever shoot par. And even those who do have played the game for years. It's quite possible you are the one and only first-time golfer ever to have shot 4 over par on an 18-hole championship course. Heck, most golfers in their early rounds shoot 4 over par on every blessed one of those 18 holes. Oh, so I did okay. Okay, Adam, if I may call you by your given name. If Sports Illustrated happened to have had a reporter on the course today, you'd be in next month's magazine, possibly on the cover. Cool, I guess I'd be one of the few non-athletes to appear in those pages. I mean, except for the swimsuit issue. She ignored me and studied the scorecard, which featured not just numbers, but notes as well. Finally, she spoke again. So listen up. That was a great first round. In fact, it was astounding. What's even more impressive, however, is that you achieved that 74 with 9 3-putt greens. If you could turn each of those 9 3-putt greens into 2-putt greens, you would have shot a 65 and would be a PGA caliber player. Holy shuddering shite, that makes my mind a maelstrom. Pardon my language. I got a few of those birdie thingamajigs too, didn't I? You surely did. 6 of them, in fact. I guess that's pretty good. Listen, Mr. Coryell, I'd really like you to play on the high school golf team. I only had one player show up, and he promptly sprained his wrist at football practice and is out. If I can get you registered for the tournament next week, will you play?
She seemed very excited. I'd forgotten there was a golf team. Well, will you be there so I know what I'm doing? Well, I'll be there, but I can't coach you during the tournament. It's not allowed. I felt a slight twinge of panic. This was getting a little out of hand. What about my writing? What about Allie? I already had a lot on my plate. I'm not sure, Ms. Davenport. Can I think about it? You get the whole day off school, Adam. Okay, I thought about it. I'm in, I replied after deep deliberation. So I get to take a cart all by myself? No. You walk and carry your own bag in tournaments. Wait, I have to walk the whole course carrying that heavy bag? I'm afraid so. That's how tournaments work. And did I mention the day off? Okay, I'll walk. Splendid. I'll try to make the arrangements. Everything moved quickly after that. 1 minute I was just a regular student with a girlfriend, stressing about my grades as I navigated my last year of high school. The next, I apparently had boundless potential as a golfer and was wearing my school colors in a tournament. I was having a hard time keeping up. It was like being swept along on the crest of a massive wave. If I windmilled my arms, I could just keep my head above the foamy, swirling water. When I stopped there.
Yeah,
I'm coming back.
So I want to open it up to the floor to some questions. So do we have some questions for Terry?
Calm down, there's time for everybody. Oh, we have one at the back. Hi.
Okay, I'm going to run the mic up, actually. Who was that again? Okay.
Our intrepid camera operator.
So I know you're talking about how a lot of the things you wrote based off, experiences in your own life, things that you already know. So I was wondering if the characters in the books, if like their personalities or their traits or anything were also based off of either you or people that you knew in your life.
Well, I try not to have myself in the novels in that way. Believe me, I would love to be as good a golfer as Adam is, but I don't think his personality is quite like mine. I try not to write autobiography in my novels, but I do want to write authentically. And what the challenge is, not the challenge, but the reality is, Adam's voice is very much like my voice. And if you've read all of my novels in quick succession, you might quickly realize that all of my narrators have voices that sound quite a bit like mine. They're all different people, and they behave in different ways, but I'm so familiar with that voice, and I want to write with as much authenticity as I can, so I tend to write in the first person and write in my own voice.
Okay, I think was there a question here as well? Is there another question in the audience? Okay, right here.
Hi there. Great job. Just wondered, when you have a 9-to-5 job, 2 children at home, walking the dog, making dinner, he had mentioned that you'd had a past career or a few different careers in your life. How did you discipline yourself to write? How did you come across it? And how did that door open for you?
Right, well, I should clarify a couple of things. Our 2 sons are 27 and 24 now, and we've never had a dog because of allergies. However, and I still do work 4 days a week in the communications agency I co-founded 25 years ago, so I can afford to be a Canadian novelist on the 5th day. But discipline you use the word discipline, I think, and it's an important word, and I like to think I have discipline. I think it was formed largely during my engineering degree. You don't pass engineering without discipline, because you just got to get the volume of work done when you get it. So I think I'm disciplined. The other part I might add is that it's easy to be disciplined when you're doing something that you love and that you really want to do. I sometimes meet people who say, oh, I just want to write a novel so badly, but I just don't have time. I just don't have time. I'm so busy. And I'm thinking, I sympathize with them outside, and then in my head I'm going, you've got time, you just don't want it enough yet. I think we can all figure out how to make
those dreams happen if we really want to write a novel. So I just figured out when I could do the writing. And it was late at night, it was early in the morning, it was on many weekends. Our kids were older. I was 45 when I wrote my first novel, so I came to writing later in life and have been trying to make up for lost time ever since. Discipline and desire are the two pillars for me, and it helps to have some craft, some sense of how to assemble sentences as well. But you can't do any of it without discipline and desire.
Are there other questions? Many questions. Thanks, Terry. He's running his own show now.
We've read all of your books, and your characterization, the way you develop your characters is like superb. But there's often a relationship between two people in all of your books that's really, really, really rich. And has there been a Ms. Davenport type person in your life? Because it's often an older person and a younger person that has that really interesting relationship.
Good question. And you're right. I often do have a serious sort of relationship, often not a romantic one, a platonic one, between a younger person and an older person. There really wasn't anyone that I can point to directly in my own life, but I just think that older people, particularly older women, have been sadly neglected in our literature. And when I wrote my first novel, and I have an octogenarian named Muriel Parkinson, losing my character's names, in that first novel, and she made me want to write more about older women, which is why my third novel features, what's her name? Landon Percival, the 71-year-old lesbian bush pilot doctor, whom I dearly love as a character. So I just think we don't, in CanLit and perhaps elsewhere too, we just don't write enough about older women. As we get older, we tend to sort of fade into the woodwork, and our value seems to be diminished. And I kind of wanted to address that by always having older characters, particularly older women, often at the center of the novels.
I think we have time for a couple more questions, and I did see hands, so there and here as well.
First of all, thank you for being here today. I just have a question. It was Adam in your story. He's mostly already got figured out what he likes, and he knows he likes writing. He knows, so I feel like for a lot of us though, that tension between success and happiness, a lot of it comes from that figuring out part. So does he I haven't read a novel yet, but does that dealt with in the novel too? Is there any process where when you get good at something, you're under the impression that you like it? So is that something that you struggle with?
Yeah, it's a good point you make, and I think some of us, perhaps even me included, fall into a career. An opportunity presents itself when we've finished our whatever schooling or we've done. We don't know what we're going to do with our life, and someone offers us a job, and I'll try that for a while. Turns out we're pretty good at it, and by all the standard measures of success, we're doing well. We're being promoted, we're being headhunted, we're getting raises. And 15 years pass, you're at the top of your game, respected in the field, and it's almost too late to change. But you wake up on a Monday morning and you're not saying, yes, I can hardly wait to get into the office. Yet you're really good at what you do. And so that was the dilemma I wanted to showcase. And in Adam's case, it's more his love of writing. He's not actually great at it. He accepts criticism very well and recognizes that he must work hard to be a writer. But he just wants it so badly that he welcomes that criticism, and he does get better. If you're at a certain threshold, if you're past a certain point in writing, you can get better with practice. And that's what he's doing, as opposed to Allison, his girlfriend, who just seems naturally blessed with an affinity for language and a gift for writing sentences. So that's an interesting juxtaposition between the two of them. But it's more desire than ability that shapes it for Adam. So you do read about that. You hear about that in Adam's journey and why he likes writing and how he's inspired by it. So yeah, that's central to the whole story. Because, and to make it really easy to think about, I made him the best golfer in the world. And I also gave him no agency over his success in golf. He can't practice, he gets worse. He can't think about it. He's just an empty vessel. He's a body swinging on the golf course. And that makes it even a starker contrast to what he wants to be as a writer.
I just had a question regarding your Canadianism, the fact that you seem to base everything very locally and very much in Canada. What I have seen also, particularly in television and that kind of thing, when Canadians try to, there seems to be a push to make things more international. There seems to be a push to say, yes, Canada's good, but if we make it a little bit more generic, we can appeal to a wider audience. What I've also seen, my base of reference is actually in the German-speaking world, is Austria and Germany. And there's also this push with Austrian authors to create this generic language that becomes then so generic that you're not recognizing the country of Austria anymore within the writing. I wonder if you had any pressure to make it more international.
I've never had any real pressure. I'm mindful that let me put it this way. None of my novels have been published in the US or anywhere else. I'm not one of those writers where they say, he's published in 27 countries in 32 different languages. I long for that day. It has not happened yet. My first 3 novels had distribution deals in the States, and my 4th novel, No Relation, was published in Taiwan. It's the only foreign publishing deal I have. So it was translated to Chinese. It made proofreading difficult for me, but and I've never seen a royalty check from the Taiwanese market, which means it probably didn't sell very well over there. So I think even when I'm not writing about Canada, I think the narrative itself and maybe the humor has a very Canadian feel to it. My 4th novel, No Relation, the one that went to Taiwan, it's really set in Chicago and New York, and it's in Paris, and there's a quick stop in Toronto, actually, and Pamplona, Spain. It's all over the place. And it's about a guy whose name is Ernest Hemingway, even though it's spelled differently and he's no relation to the famous writer. That book, we couldn't interest anyone in the United States in that book. So I'm not really thinking about other markets. I would love that to happen, because then I could maybe go down to 3 days a week in the office. But I think there's a Canadian feel to the writing and the humor. I didn't realize that, but that enough people have told me that over the years that I've started to believe it. So, hope springs eternal, though.
Thank you so much for coming out. Thank you for the lovely questions. And especially thank you to Terry Fallis. So we have a quick announcement also from the Artistic Director of Words, Josh Lambier.